This will be a quick video of approval tests using the approved package. So on the right here, I have your standard Flutter counter app. And to test for this app, you typically write code to build your widgets and then more code to confirm that your widgets render as expected. With the approved package, you can replace this with a single line of code that calls approval test. And with approval tests, with approved, you now, as with standard tests, you run Flutter test. And this test will fail because we don't have any Flutter rendering information. And it generates this unapproved.txt file that's given the same name as your test. So if I were to look into this file, it shows that I had a my app widget, my homepage widget. I had one of each, and I had some text that said you have pushed this button this many times, and the data was 0 and approved example. So that all looks good, but rather than opening the file explicitly, approved comes with a review app. So what I do is I say dart run approved, the name of the package, and review. And that will show the results of the file tests, and I can review and approve it right here in the command line, or I can type V to view the file in VS Code, as I just opened. So if that looks good, I can close that file and say, yes, I approve. So as you're coding along and making changes, as we developers do, suppose I want to add a key to this text value here. And I'm going to call it key counter. So now when I run my Flutter tests, we have a change in that widget. So of course our test is going to fail. So I could type dart run like as I did before, but I have set up an alias where I can just type review. And that will show all my reviews here, and I'm going to view that in VS Code. So this time we don't see one file, we see two. We see the previous one that we had approved, and then the new one that shows the difference. And we look at that, we see our new key here, and like, yep, that looks good. Close my file and approve. So now if I run my test, that will all come across green. Approval tests are also great for reviewing states of widgets after you perform a gesture. So suppose I want to tap on my floating action button and pump and settle. I can then call approval test again to review the state of the widgets after this tap. And because I have two approve calls to approval tests and it uses the file, the test name to name the files, I need to give this second approval test a unique name. So I'll call it after fab tap. And then just as before, I can run that test. And the first approval test will pass as before, but now this is the first run on the second one. So I can review that. And what this shows is the difference between the first run and the second run. So it tells me on the first run, I had this key counter, this text widget with a key of counter and a data value of 0, but now I have 0 instances of that. So that widget went away, or that state went away, and now it is set to 1, which is what you would expect after a tap of the fab button. So that all looks good. Close the file and approve that. So now if I run my Flutter tests again, we come across green. So now in the course of writing and working on my code, I do what also developers do, which is occasionally introduce regression. So suppose I accidentally change the increment on my counter value here, and then as we like to do, we run our tests, and this second test will now fail because the counter value is wrong. So I can review that, and again look at it in VS Code. So just as before, we have two files. This is the first one that we had approved, and then I can look at this and say, oh, that's not right. I don't want to have a value of 1 after have a value of 2 after one tap. So I can go back to my code, say, oh, yep, introduce regression there, and then no, I do not want to accept that change. And now when I run my Flutter tests, we come across green once again. Approval tests can be used for any type of text output, not just the state of widgets, but also can be used for unit tests, block tests, and integration tests. So here in my little example here, I have this this class person that creates some kind of simple data and your to JSON output. To write a test for this, I create a simple test. I'm going to call it default person, and I'm going to generate a person from my class. And then rather than calling the tester approval test, which reviews widget states, I'm just calling the straight approval test. And I'm giving my test a name, and I'm going to give it some text to test. In this case, I'm going to generate some JSON. So I'll save that and run my Flutter test. And of course, just as before, we'll get a fail. And when I review it, I'm going to see the state of my JSON. So I say, okay, that looks good to me, and I approve it. So now when I run my Flutter test, we get all green once again. So the review statement has some options. So if I type help, it'll give me a list of what I can do with it currently. And right now, the biggest one is list. So if I type review list, it'll show me the unapproved files, which in this case is 0. So we have 2 tests here that perform 3 approval tests. So if I were to say delete these, kind of restore us back to no approved, then if I run Flutter test again, then we're going to get 2 failures because the first approval test failed in the first test, and then the second test failed as well. So when I type review, I can type review them all, or I can say review list, and it shows me the 2 that failed. I can review an individual one by saying review 0 by referencing the index, or I can review it by giving the full path to the test name, like this. But instead, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say review, and we'll review both tests at the same time. So here I'm just going to say, yep, that one looks okay, and that one looks okay too. So now when I do a test, we'll fail on the second test, which wasn't reached the first time around. I can look at that again. That looks good to me, and so I approve. More features are to come on the review app, so you might occasionally want to write review help to get a list of the current values. For more information on the approved package, check it out on pub.dev.